all that there is what's on the tables. So people may have to share. So let me tell people what's going on. So my name is Mimi Turchinev. I'm the president of the Hyde Park Neighborhood Association. And what we're trying to do tonight is give everybody a real sense of the Squares and Streets initiative that is coming from the mayor's office and the Boston Planning and Development Agency, and let you start to really understand it and build and understand what's going on with the mapping. Could you, Scott or somebody, could you advance this? So in terms of our agenda tonight, we have a fairly aggressive agenda, but we're going to go through 1 through 4 very quickly, and then the bulk of the time is to do this building mapping exercise, which is going to be a lot of fun. So we want people to have fun with this. In terms of meeting protocol, I want to make sure that you can ask questions as we're going through, but they should be clarifying questions because it's dense stuff. We know that. Some of the slides are going to seem super dense. We'll do our best to explain them. I think some people here are here for the first time, and some people have been coming to a bunch of meetings. Can I see a show of hands for the people who are here the first time and don't really know what Squares and Streets is? So what this initiative is the goal is that the city of Boston has a goal to rezone the city. And so rezoning really means how you can build buildings, the amount of density, what goes where, what is in particular uses for the land. Okay, and we'll kind of talk about that. But for those of you who are here for the first time, it's going to feel a little confusing because we're going through the process quickly because we've had about 4 community meetings already, but we will do our best. So you should ask questions if you have questions, and then we will do our best to answer them. But so Justin, no, stay there. So this is the format of the meeting. Can people who are part of the team raise their hands? So this is Ken Fields, who is helping around zoning stuff. This is Marlon Solomon with Afro-American Academy. Tim Smith, who is kind of a volunteer architect doing amazing work. Pat Alvarez from the Southwest Boston CDC. Scott Beatty from a neighbor and also Main Streets at Hyde Park Board of Trade. And Joan Cregenti, who is the president of Root Park Neighborhood Association. So that's the team, right? And Jay Padgett also with the Southwest Boston CDC board. And so I'm going to kind of step back and hand it over to Scott Beatty to really talk about how we got here, the role of the community, and if people, when you're addressing the crowds, the group, let's do our best to kind of be as preliminary and explain as Squares and Streets as possible, because there's so many people here who are new. So thank you, everybody, for those of you who are new. It's super, super important that we understand this, because what is going to happen is that the city is going to do some mapping with us, and it's going to be similar to what we're trying to do with you today. So we're trying to get ahead of it so people understand what's going on. And as we go on, you'll try to, hopefully you can understand this a little better, because it's a lot of information for the first time.
Okay. See how this works. Is that loud enough to be able to?
I think so.
Okay. So how did we get here? We've been at this project since the end of last year. Our first meetings with the city were actually here upstairs. Actually, we're at the library. But the bottom line is that the city, as Mimi has described, is trying to compress the zoning of the city of Boston down to 6 zones. Right now, the city code, I think there's something like 100 pages to the code for 23 neighborhoods. So they're trying to actually be able to make it simpler, more easy to understand, but also to be able to encourage more development. And that's kind of why we're here, because our square, along with Rosendale, a couple of other squares as well, have been identified as an area of the city where we can take on more density as far as housing. We live near transit lines plus. And so we've been identified as a neighborhood that could happen in, and we could accommodate that. So I want to make it clear though, because it does get confusing. We are all representing, we're not working for the city hall, okay? We are all representing the neighborhood of Hyde Park. We came together as a group of people who saw an opportunity to not push back to the city to say we don't want additional housing or whatever, but we, in conversations with the mayor's team, the agreement was we're moving, hopefully they're moving at the speed of trust with the community. So that's kind of where everybody in this room comes in. So there's been a lot of work done. We're going to hear about a citizen's petition that was filed, asking for certain amendments to what's been proposed. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but other people are. So there's been a lot of work done, but so far it's been this little team of people and our ideas, and we really need to broaden that and get other people's input in terms of what is the district going to look like in the future, what do you want to see, what maybe you don't want to see. So that's why we're all here today. So we talk about all these different zones and what the heights are and all that good stuff, but I'll throw out a few things. In our community, right now, the Pride just opened. We're really excited to have the Pride here. The Pride was built. There's 5 handicap parking spots. That was it. 76 units of housing. B'nai B'rith is coming up to run senior housing in the middle of the square. You see it built right now. That is going to have designated parking for those units. But going forward, most of these proposals do not have parking as a requirement. So that's one concern the neighborhood has expressed about. Another concern will be what's going to happen to our largely first generation BIPOC business owners across this community when development comes in and they potentially are going to see increases in their rent. And how is that going to impact these business owners? Residents, I think it's not an ink at this point, but one of the factors around this project was to allow on residential streets coming out of this district, which by the way Penn is a 1/3 mile basically from the center, which I think is Bank of America, where it was originally Penn. But this is more representational. I mean, when we first saw that, we're trying to figure out which streets cross the circle. It's just a representational area of where they'd like to see this development. One of the things that came out of that was that in a residential / transitional commercial street, which could be like Central Ave. I happen to live on Central Ave, that there are some businesses and academia on that street that, as proposed, would have allowed up to 14 units of housing, provided that it didn't take more than, I think, 65% of the footprint of the lot, and 4 stories high, and you as an abutter would not have say in that matter. So I'm using that as an example of things that we called out of the project to say, we don't think that's probably ideal, and that's one of the things we're push back on. And then finally, I'd say talk about displacement of business owners, talk about the parking issues. We're concerned about height, and that's when we keep hearing this word mapping, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, what the heck's that? Mapping is going to be where the city wants to come in and basically make some proposals about what the height of these buildings would be and where they would be. And that's where I think this group collectively representing Hyde Park can kind of push back a little bit, or not push back, but give feedback about what we'd like to see in that process, or maybe not. I.e., maybe we don't want a 6-story building in the middle of the district, or maybe we do. So that's basically just an overview of why we're here. Timeline, let's see. The timeline's kind of moved a little bit. I think it's because we are the first with Rosendale, and this group has given a lot already to the city to think about. So I think that's given them a little bit of pause in terms of rollout to us. But original rollout was timeline. So this process, let's say January, February, they had a primer released to the community. They had a bunch of open houses. A lot of you probably were there, or some of you were there. March through May, they were doing educational workshops with small businesses, housing, walking through the district. We participated in some of that. And then July through September, draft recommendations. And then finally, there's, how should I say, there's going to be a mapping exercise for the community as well as an ideas session. And I think that's the next step, is the ideas session, which hasn't been scheduled yet, is going to happen sometime, proposed end of October, maybe. It's not on your website yet when, but that'll be the next opportunity for us as a community to get together with the city to talk about the ideas, and then they will give us their ideas about what's being proposed. And then finally, they will do a mapping exercise with everybody. So we're just trying to get ahead of that a little bit. I just want to again say, this organization is not anti-development. We're not anti-housing. We know the city of Boston's got a housing crisis. We just want to make sure that as it's developed in our community, that it's done, at speed of trust with the community, but also makes sense for the people that live here, that development isn't done unbridled, and that it's such that our quality of life remains good, high, whatever. So that's it. Anyway. Wow.
What's up, Greg?
Greg.
I just was curious, just at the end, you said some type of a mapping process, and then you said, and then they will do a mapping exercise.
Right.
I thought that they were the ones who were doing the one before as well.
Well, what I guess what Craig, what I was trying to say is, we're doing mapping tonight. We're starting with the community, meaning the citizens group, and then after they have their ideas session,
So
they will come in and do their mapping proposal to the community.
Okay.
We're
Yeah,
just getting
sorry about
prepared for
Just
dealing
a
with them.
question.
Yeah.
You said they're displacing the people that have their own businesses.
Right.
Does that also mean that they could displace residents as well?
Well, I don't think directly. I mean, there's nothing in this that talks about anything like eminent domain or anything like that. But I mean, we're already seeing it. There's one side of the ledger says there's a lot of interest in Hyde Park right now, clearly, from development, from all different aspects. And the value of the houses obviously going up, the value of all the real estate going up, but also the rents going up too. So what does it do to renters in the community? Not as much as homeowners, I think. It's the renters in the community that this is, again, we want to be part of the solution, not the problem. But there isn't anything that we see in this proposal has anything to do with, somebody owning their house being displaced. But it's more like people being displaced because if rent goes up dramatically, then and our community becomes unaffordable for a family to live in, then that's how potentially they'd be displaced. Yep.
I mean, if someone owns their home and has an apartment,
Right.
rents an apartment,
Yep.
and they sell that to a developer,
Well, the idea of the recording, sorry.
It is on. And then they sell it to a developer who wants to put up a 4-story, 14-unit. The tenant in that building may not be able to afford
Right.
the new. So there's that.
Great example.
Right. The other thing I want to say, just for clarity's sake, when you say mapping, the city has revised its residential zoning, but they have not said where it will apply. Right.
Right.
That's what you mean by mapping.
That's part of it.
Right. This is what the question that came up at their planning session back in the summer. They would not answer that question. Where will these new rules apply?
And we still don't know the answer
Right.
to that. Yep. So that's part of it. The mapping is, okay, within the zones, what are the tolerances, and then where are those zones?
So people don't even know what zones are.
Right,
So
exactly.
that's-
So we're gonna let Marlon, we're gonna get a little bit more granular further.
Hopefully not too granular.
Maybe not too granular.
Right. Hi there, everybody. How y'all doing? All right. I left to go get the sound system. There was nobody here. I came here. Everybody was prompt. Way to go, Hyde Park. We've been at this process for quite a while, and one of the challenges that we faced and some of the things that we decided to talk to the city about was, what does this look like? Like when you come with S0, in fact, today we're going to not talk about S0. We're going to talk about actually the story heights, because it's just easier to digest, right? S0, S1, store flies, this and that. And these are the problems that we gave to the BPDA so they could explain to people so they would know what was happening, right? And these, what we're here to discuss and how we're here to map and things is extremely important, because at the end of the day, we need to think of how we're going to keep our community looking and feeling the way that it is now, okay? And what they're proposing is basically going to bring in like, like 1-2 bedroom, it's for young professionals. Like, South Boston is a good example, right? South Boston, people don't know, has been basically almost completely gentrified, right? Because it's white on white gentrification, we kind of look at it and say it didn't happen, but it actually did happen, because the middle class, working class Irish community is no longer the prominent population in South Boston. And why? Because they built and designed buildings, not exactly like this, but to the extent where it houses young professionals. That's what it's for, all right? And when you do this, I always say, if you build it, they will come. And that's what they're proposing to build here. And that means that 10 to 15 years, it's not going to be a very diverse community, period, regardless of whether we like it or not. And what we're going to try and do is try to stave that off as much as possible, help the people that we can help the most possible by these kind of presentations. So this is S0, which is the immediate area. You can see, if you notice, the pride right there. And this is a representation similar to the models that Tim made. I think he did an amazing job. But this is what it will look like on a piece of land right behind the pride, not too far away from where we're here today.
How many stories is that?
Can you go to the next slide? 3, 4. All right. This is S1, maximum 4 floors, right? And you can see just basically about the size of the Muni. And actually, when I went outside, when I came in here today, I saw they had done the staircase stack, and it's almost right, just about the size of the Muni.
That's not hypothetical, it's not lit, is that correct?
Well, no, this is not hypothetical, but it's not exactly to scale. Yes. This is yes. Sorry, that's what you meant. Yeah. It is a good representation, but it's not exactly like, verbatim to scale. But it was using the well, I guess the visual representations on the picture. All right, but it's basically accurate to give people an idea of what it looks like, right? Because it's one thing to say S1, S2, S3, what kind of floors, right? But this is what it actually looks like. Is this what we want? Not to mention that there's no storefronts on this on what they put in there. So we lost ground floor 4. Yeah, but we don't know what. So our city center, where our community makes its money, right? This is where our businesses are. This is where our BIPOC first generation businesses are located. They will not have that. You can go to the next slide. I'm trying to make this quick. This is another representation of another S2, which is also 4 floors. Now, one of the things about I want to explain very simply is how they use, how high you can go. All right, that's 5. That's 2 is 5. Please help me, because I normally have the things. All right, so right, you have 5 floors here, but the reason why you can go 5 floors is how big the land, the plot, that you have. So if you have a bigger plot of land, you can go higher. Okay.
Marlon, much more basic. Does anybody know what he's talking about? Does anybody understand this at all? People, you need it to be really, really basic. Most people in this room are new.
I will. Thank you. Thank you.
I got a question. Though.
Yeah.
The Rogers, which is now the Pride, was 4 stories anyway, because it was a school.
Right.
So basically, it's grandfathered anyway, because it's grandfathered.
Right.
Because it's a school, you know? So basically, that's not a very good model, because, you know, the Rogers versus the Pride was a 4-story building anyway, or 4.5-story building. So it's really a bad situation that you can say, well, that is now 4 stories, because it was a school at one
You mean
point.
the pride over there?
Yeah, you know?
This is just a representation of what could be there if the zoning, what is allowed, if the zoning is allowed to go through. This is a representation of what could go there. That is not like this is what's gonna go there.
Right, but you know, I don't want a 4-story building.
Yeah, exactly.
My house.
So it's 7 o'clock, we're gonna get thrown out at 8. Can you move through quickly so that
You're at 3.
we have?
All right. So S3 and S4, same difference. You can see here, this is 7 and about 7 floors approximately, and you need a wider space in order to go up high. So that's just basically how it goes. When you have a piece of land, you're allowed to use about 60% of it for the footplate, which is the foundation of your building. All right. So you have a piece of land, you take 60% of it, and then you now use that to build your actual house or building. All right. Now, and depending on how big that 60% is, you can go higher. Clear? Is that clear? Anybody have any questions on that? Because it's very, very central to what's going on. And remember, this is what's allowed. This is what they're saying this is allowed. But
Allowed yet.
well, this is what's proposed allowed.
Okay, so if they build all these buildings, what about the parking? What about the parking?
The
People that live here,
right.
okay, like I live on Hyde Park Ave. And sometimes I can't even get a parking in front of my house.
Right.
I have to go all the way down to the Pride
Right.
or all the way down to West Street to park.
Right.
So you're all talking about building these houses, but what about the parking with the people that live here for years and have to park down West Street or park down where the Pride is or park down where River Street and get a ticket because you're living in Hyde Park and you park in front of you can't get a parking in your house.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, please give it up. No, I completely agree. And this is one of the things that we're being fighting about because the Pride, when they put there 74, 76 units, and they only provided, I think, 5 parking spaces. So that is a net loss of, so those people that live there will have a car and their car is going to be on the street, which is now making it harder to park, which is now giving less access. Parking is access. All right. How many of us here have tried to go downtown and didn't go because there was no parking? Right. So that means that if people are not going to come here, I'm going to Hyde Park, I ain't going to Cleary Square. There's ain't no parking. Right. So this is very important for our businesses. So don't look at parking as some arbitrary thing on the side. Well, it's just parking. People will find a place to park. The resistance to parking easy will affect our businesses invariably. So this is just one example. Can we go to the next slide? And this is another example. And we have, you'll see the representations on the map because like I said, Tim did an actual awesome job. But look at this in comparison to the Pride, right? Look at all the other buildings that are there. This was taken when, across the street wasn't really done. That's the Muni where we are today. This is the proposed future of Hyde Park, or allowed for future. And we all know that contractors, if you get this space, the pricing will be based on the zoning, right? Because they're going to say, well, I'm not going to sell you this land for a bungalow price because we know you can go up 7 floors. So I'm going to charge you for, what you could possibly do there. And of course, that now goes on to the contractor who's going to say, well, we got to go as high as possible because we're paying this money for this opportunity to go that high. We have to take advantage. And move on. All right, and then these are the parking spaces as you alluded to, which is very important. We are fighting for it. In fact, our citizens position, we had to remove it. They'll talk about it a little later. We had to remove the parking provision because the city would not pass it. Next slide. These are just some of the historic buildings that we have in our community that we're trying to make sure we identify and preserve so we can still keep the character of our fine city. Go back one. And this is very important to understand. The reason why we have the lowest, was it residential, is the lowest cost per, you said it today, Scott, when we were talking.
We have the highest, we have the most green canopy.
No, the lowest cost to build.
Yes, we have the lowest active use / commercial rental rate in the city.
Right. So that means we're very attractive because it's cheap to get in. And the reason why is because this, where the commuter rail is, was supposed to be I-90, all right, during the urban renewal days in the 60s. So the reason why we are being inundated is because this place is basically undeveloped. It was preserved because of that highway was never built. Imagine there was a I-95 right there next to us. Right now, this would have already, I mean, we would have already had whatever, 7-story buildings here ages ago. Would have been looking like the Ink Block area, right? Or New York Streets area. That's what this would have been. So this is very important to understand that we're trying to preserve our green city. And go next slide and I'm done. And this is just a sample of our beautiful city during the summer. And now I'll give it to Ken.
Thanks. I'm going to try and run through this real quick. Nobody has proposed anything under squares and streets that's being built yet. The zoning article has been passed by the city, Article 26. It doesn't rezone the city. It rezones certain squares where they've put out a circle. And within those circles, they're coming out to each community to map the communities. What we're here for tonight is to give you the concept of mapping, and we're going to get into that with these blocks in front of you. So I'm supposed to be talking about the citizens petition. It's not rezoning, it's upzoning. They're making it easier for people to build a project, get a building permit without hurdles. They're doing that to advance affordable housing, and they want affordable housing around transportation hubs, which we call transit-oriented zoning. So our petition has basically looked at all these S zones, and this is the last we're talking about S zones. You have a key on your table, but just to understand what our petition is, there's all these S zones. There is a gap in between S2, which goes up to 5 stories, and S3, which goes up to 7 stories. And in feet, that's a 20-foot difference. We are concerned that the city is going to push that S3 zones in certain areas near our transit lines here. So we are proposing 2 new zones. One's lower. It's called S0A. That's 35 feet high, 3 stories maximum. We'll talk about uses very briefly in a second. We are adding another zone, S2.5. That goes up 75 feet, and that would allow for a 6-story building. We think that that's the maximum, and that's really pushing the limit for Hyde Park. And that's why we're pushing this petition into the city. Other parts of the petition, which we're not really going to get into, have to do with uses, encouraging commercial and active uses on our ground and upper floors so that we can activate our squares, keep our businesses happy, bring in more businesses. That's pretty much it. So let's talk to Tim. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's a good question. Let me just briefly answer that. So we filed a petition with the zoning commission. And you had to pay a filing fee? We had to pay a filing fee, but we went and spoke with the Boston Planning Agency, and the Boston Planning Agency spoke with us about various things that they didn't like. They actually did an analysis of our petition and gave us criticism. We took that and we are now revising to make it more accommodating to what the city would actually accept and get the zoning commission to approve. So it's the zoning commission.
I just got one question. I know that you said it's supposed to be for more professional people. Sure, okay. What about crime? Professional people do crime. Right now, I assume that Hyde Park is the most lowest crime right now in Boston. More people you get, more young people you get, more professional people you get, more crime you get. So are we going to get more police to patrol these areas? That's the whole thing.
Angela, that's kind of out of the scope of the meeting. This is stuff you need to ask the city. We aren't trying to push this. We're trying to save us. So it's a great point to talk about those type of issues. We're just trying to get a sense here of what these zones mean, how high the buildings are, because they're gonna come in within a month and start asking people here to map where they want these S zones. So we want you to understand they're tied into building heights, at least that's the exercise for tonight. Let's start talking about building heights. And Tim, do you want to explain what we're going to do here?
Before we do that, I just want to mention, when we talk about affordable housing, it means something different. They're talking about affordable, meaning somebody who has an income up, a single person with an income up to like $103,000. Well, what about the people who earn $30,000 a year, or $40,000, or $60,000, or $70,000? They're going to be competing for the same apartments as people who earn $103,000. So, to me, that's a big problem I have with the way the city's thinking about this. It's not truly affordable for most people. Anyway, that's just another thing to think about.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Smith. I live at Franklin Terrace at the lower part of Fairmount Hill. Been here about 13 years. As an architect for 35 years. Did meetings like this with a lot of community groups and public housing residents. Worked on a lot of public housing redevelopments. And I didn't realize how successful or what an impact working in 3 dimensions can be until I started doing it. People started making a one-to-one connection and being able to understand their own neighborhood in a much better way. One way to do this, the reasons for doing this is to understand your community in a way that you can't do in 2 dimensions. You can't even do in 3 dimensions from, is this working? Is this on? Yeah, okay. 3 dimensions on so-called Google Earth, to really be able to see the whole neighborhood at once in this way is really helpful to folks. So we understand the physical and built attributes of your neighborhood. We want to figure out what we want to insist on preserving. Where does preservation make sense? Where do areas where new development could happen? Where does that occur? Where do we want that to occur? And then other requirements that we have, open space. We've talked a little bit about traffic, parking, things like that. That's not so much the subject of tonight. We're really going to be talking about some really basic things where Ken presented a zoning sheet. There are a million things to consider when you're doing zoning. We're looking at height tonight. That's all we're looking at tonight because we only have a limited amount of time. The most important thing, and I think Scott might have said it, but just to prepare ourselves, to become informed about what the city is coming back to us. Redevelopment is coming to Hyde Park, whether we like it or not. And the city is advocating for that. We have a chance to at least inform them about what our preferences are. So there's no guarantee of what we come up with is going to be implemented, but we have to inform ourselves to know how to talk and run through the way they're looking at these neighborhoods as well. They probably don't have a neat model like this, I bet, down at the City Hall. But so anyway, I'm happy to be here. This is an old postcard. This is from 1910. So this is Everett Square, now known as Logan Square. I presented this just to bring a little levity into this. Zoning is really boring. And so to talk about, let's have fun, a little bit of fun tonight, move things around, not feel so constrained. But also people have been talking about redesigning Logan Square in this area for over 100 years. So, I mean, this is a great image. But next slide.
So this is what they thought the future would look like with all these, I guess.
Yeah, the funny thing is none of the buildings have changed, though. That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. None of the buildings.
So I think this is our preservation district right here. Next slide. So the city has certain areas in mind. Scott presented a circle around an area that just was so generic that it almost didn't have any meaning at all. You can see now they're starting to zero in on these areas. These maps represent those pockets, those sort of bubbles, globs, whatever you want to call them. And so we're focusing on these two because we know they're going to come to a meeting and say, we want to put a 7-story building here. And maybe that we're okay with that. Maybe we aren't, but we need to prepare ourselves that that's coming. We need to know how to respond to that. So we're focusing on height tonight. So at your only printed out, you have to share these things. But basically, this is a guide. You don't have to look at it continuously. This is just a guide for the blocks that are on your right. The white blocks are all existing. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's great. So the white blocks are all existing conditions. And so we have yellow, which is the thing that's part of, that Ken mentioned as part of the citizens petition, which is the 35-foot buildings. We have the, I'm not even saying the S zone, but then we have 50-foot.
Can we go by number of stories? I think that's more useful
Sure,
for people.
that's also on here as well. So, okay, thanks. So we got yellow, which is this one that we're using for the citizens petition, the red, 4 stories, S1 and S2, which are a little bit different based on the maximum square foot per floor, but 4 and 5 stories. And then I made a mistake. I got to say, I was up till midnight last night painting these little boxes. And anyway, so these should be flipped. The S25 is the blue. Okay, so you write that, someone could write that on their thing. So the blue is actually the S25, the S3 is the green.
And there, how many stories? The blue and green?
The blue is 6 stories, and flipping this in, the green would be 7 stories. 1 sec. And then finally, there is something called, I'm not going to refer to it as by its S number, because I'm not talking about that anymore. But we have a thing that's 13 to 15 stories, 145 feet tall. So if you were really bold and want to be a Robert Moses of your Hyde Park neighborhood, which is a famous planner from New York, you might know, you could do something like that. But I don't know that we're going to get around to using 145-foot buildings. I don't think it's appropriate here. You might have a different opinion. I'm all for it. So start. You can stay at your tables. You can move around. You can go to different. If you figure out one neighborhood, want to move to the next, feel free to do that as well. Just figure out. Could something go in the Shaw's? I'm just making suggestions. Shaw's parking lot, could that be developed with parking?
Tim, can you explain the question here?
Yeah.
As a point of reference, when you're driving in the Jamaica Way towards Boston,
yeah,
you have that huge tower sticking up.
Right.
How tall is that?
Is it 30 stories? 30 stories. That's about 300 feet then, roughly.
So can you explain to people again what these stations are? Just review
Yes,
it
thank you.
again.
So there's 4 stations, basically. We're referring back to that map that had the 6 blobs, basically. But this is Hyde Park South. This runs from Mother Brook up to Cleary Square. That's Hyde Park North. It runs from around Ron's. You can see the cow we found and put it on top. It's down there in the corner over there. So Ron's Ice Cream going up to West Street. Can you tell me what that one is over there, sir? What's the say at the corner down there? Wait. River Street. This is River Street that runs from right about Webster down by the Seventh-day Adventist Church all the way up to Cleary Square, crosses and goes over to Gordon Ave. And that is Fairmount Ave, which goes from about Truman Highway down by Cappy's all the way up to Logan Square. So feel free to move around. Good thing to
What
do.
are they supposed to be doing? What are people doing?
People can, I'm sorry about that. People can move things around. They could look for vacant space. There's a vacant space right here. Does it make sense based on being close to the MBTA? Does it make sense to be 5-story buildings, about 50 feet? Can we go taller here?
So the little blocks are the same color as what's on that piece of paper you have.
Right.
So if you want to put a 5-story building somewhere, go ahead and take that color. What color is that?
Red.
Red. Go
Red
ahead
or
and take the
purple,
red block and put it where you want to
Sorry,
see
purple,
it.
yeah.
Same thing if you want a 4-story or 15-story or whatever. And if you don't want anything, leave it the way it is.
Also to give you a sense of
Great.
what you can see,
Yeah,
there were different types of buildings anywhere, see what it would look like. It's not that you want it there to see.
For discussion, yeah, really,
Get an
yeah,
understanding of
yeah.
what this really means.
Yeah, I was just concerned that this is kind of being run like the BPDA meetings. Remember, the initial meeting with the former director who went to Detroit, he conceded that indeed, if we did prefer the NS2 zoning, which we rezoned Cleary Square as a dozen years ago, that indeed consensus they would allow that. And this seems to be almost like forcing us to put a big block somewhere. We didn't put it this, we have to put it somewhere. You don't have to. You
No.
can
Thank you, Craig.
appreciate
Yeah.
the 40 feet, 4-story
So
zoning that we currently have.
Can I respond to that question? Because I think that's a really great question. if people want Hyde Park never to change and stick with the NS2
Well,
zoning.
that's
Just-
a little.
Okay, stay with that N2 zoning, sorry.
Just that we prefer, not that we don't.
Okay, fair enough.
We did change when we rezoned it.
Okay,
We-
okay.
We did significantly change.
Okay, fair enough, okay. But if people want things to stay within the NS2 zoning, which is a maximum of 35 feet, 40 feet, okay, 40 feet, something around between the yellow and the red block, something in that height, then, you know, redevelopment is going to come here at some point. There's going to be tremendous pressure on, and I just want us to be informed. I want us to think about if there are areas where we, you know, make sense to build higher around T-stops, but I'm not trying to force anything. I'm just saying that these are the blocks that they're using. And I just want us to say, if there's no block here that we want, but play with it first. See, I think people just, there's 40 people here. Just everybody have an opportunity to express their opinion, respect what other people say. If you come in and say, wow, I really like this idea of making a place here, you know.
Well, they knocked down the buildings that was historic, because I have pictures.
Absolutely.
When it was the quarries and when the square used to have a bowling
that's-
alley down there.
yeah.
Will they take away the history of Hyde
That's
Park?
what we're trying, that's one thing one of the things as part of the exercise is where we want to be our preservation areas. What are preservation areas? Do we want to preserve Upper Hyde Park where all those houses are, all those beautiful Victorians? We want to preserve that as a residential small
I
scale area.
think that what we should do,
Just do it.
one of the team should be at each table
Yes.
and should take notes about what it is that people are, what the questions are, where there's confusion,
Right.
whether or not, if everybody at the table says, I don't want anything taller than 4 stories, then that should be a conversation at the table. So if you say, I think that there should be parking, part of the challenge with this proposal that the city is putting forward is there's no parking required for any of the buildings, right? There are certain things that they're proposing that what we have to do is react to them and then try to decide what it is that we would like to see and what it is that we don't want to see. So if people don't want 6 stories, people should say at the table, I don't want 6 stories. I don't want 6 stories anywhere. Or maybe you do want 6 stories, and where would it be? And so that's really the conversation is, what is it that you would like to see? What is it you don't want to see? And what are your ongoing questions?
And where would you like to preserve things? I'm sorry.
I just want to interject one thing here. So the fact that we think that we can stand still and development isn't coming, that's not realistic. But it is realistic for us. We've pushed back quite a bit on some of the proposals already. But if we look at this and say, we don't want 6-story buildings in the district, or if you're gonna build it, we want it down Truman Parkway, away from the square, or down Hyde Park Ave, closer to wherever that is. It's like, that's also, messaging that's important for the city here. But the idea that development isn't coming is totally unrealistic, because it is. We have a chance.
Okay.
So let's play
So
blocks.
Yes.
I just wanted to,
And I have this.
who is the city councilor is here, I don't know if you wanted to say hello to people quickly or a minute.
Yeah, I promise I'll be quick. Good evening, everyone. Enrique Pepper. I'm just very thankful for the organization that took place and make this possible. Shout out to Tim.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing that. That really helps it put into perspective. And I'm just very, very honored that you guys are working on citizen petition, which is why I'm here, just to get a sense of how the neighborhood feels, where we're heading towards everything, what we consensus. So when we do testify at the planning department, we're all in agreement of it.
Grab a block.
Thank you. So everybody, can I just say something, please?
concerned about height.
You can feel free to move from the table you're at. You're more concerned about a different neighborhood. Don't worry about it.
And I'm gonna have this, like some of, everybody, if you guys need any information, like the historical buildings and things like that, I have that here, so just ask me.
I'm over here, 3 stories, 4 stories, 5, 6, everybody's there, there's no place to sit.
So here we have the Hyde Park MBTA. We like the parking lot better than.
It's a good thing to say.
You see a possibility of doing any development that.
So this is the library, what is sitting right here? So if you want
Parking lots on one houses.
So.